movie, and probably has. How would I know? But probably has. Um, the story, as everybody knows, is that KORACH is the cousin of Moshe Rabbeinu, and he is a man of great wealth, repute, handsome, dashing, a man of huge charisma, and he takes on Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron and forms a rebellion. Takes 250 of the best men in mainly one tribe, but as well other tribes, and structures a rebellion. What's the rebellion about? He objects to the fact that that Moshe Rabbeinu, his cousin, is appointing his other cousin, Aaron, Moshe Rabbeinu's elder brother, to be the Kohen Gadol. And he says, I want to be Kohen Gadol. So the simple story is that Moshe Rabbeinu says they bring tourists, they bring incense every day. So you'll bring your incense in your pans, and we'll bring our incense in our pans, and whichever one God recognizes will be the correct Kohen Gadol. And he agrees. The test takes place. Of course, Hashem indicates who should be the Kohen Gadol, and the earth opens up, swallows them up. They die in this pit of it's blood, guts. It's a massive story of rebellion, and then you have the commentators. The commentators explain that this man KORACH is driven by yeshus, by ego, and the Gemara goes through great lengths to ask what was his sin really, and the answer, of course, is that he caused machloikas, that he caused quarrel. But then the Gemara says, but who says quarrel's bad? We have the whole of the Talmud, the Talmud Bavli, is nothing else but arguments between the Tanoim and the Amoraim, and so then the Gemara explains that there are machloikases which are for good, and there are machloikases which are for bad. So then there's a question of which is which. So on what basis is a machloikas good? On what basis is machloikas bad? And we can have shurim on that and learn. This is what I'm saying. There's so many levels to this week's Sidra. At a deeper level, we learn when you're a beginner, it's a surprise that this arch enemy of Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron is in fact a man of great learning and great piety and great frumkeit, and he's a man with many noble motives and virtues, to the point that if you really get to the very deepest levels of Chassidus, he's very much admired in many ways, because what he wanted was very holy. What he wanted was great Kedusha. I'll try and explain that a bit as we go. But that great Kedusha that he wanted is also wrong. So it's very easy to get lost in this and be overtaken by the story. So it's a question of choosing which level of this we should go through. So I'll mention a couple of things from a couple of sikhs, and then we'll learn an astonishing concept that the Rebbe goes through in a Maimah from Gimel Tammuz, which turned out to prophetically be a very big day in Chabad. Mind you, should know it's been a big day before the Rebbe's passing. On Gimel Tammuz, the Frierdiker Rebbe was released from prison. His Geula started on Gimel Tammuz. By the way, in Tanakh, Gimel Tammuz also has a very big place because it's the day that Yeshua stopped the sun. But this mimer that we're going to learn some pieces of tonight, which is really astonishing, is from Shabbos Pashas KORACH Gimel Tammuz in Tovshin Yud Ches. So that's 1958. The Rebbe had only been Rebbe then 7 years, and the extraordinary thing about the Rebbe's Torah is that its complexity never changed. From the time before he was Rebbe, to when he was Rebbe, to being Rebbe for so long, with so many Maimorim, so many Sikhs, he never watered anything down, he never made anything more complicated. It was always at one level, and that level bears learning and relearning over and over again. And I know people who've learned certain Maimorim literally 100 times, and they tell me that every time they learn it, there's another level available. So let's just do a couple of the easier. Let's just do a couple of the easier aspects of this before we go any further. What was KORACH's problem? Now, for the rest of this year, I'd like everybody to understand, take the view that we're not talking about a ratbag criminal. We're talking about a holy Jew. We're talking about a man who was steeped in Torah, steeped in learning, and when you ask yourself, how could he do what he did, you have to understand that his reasons, even though that you'll see that they were wrong, but his reasons were based on very holy, noble intentions. That's how we learn it in Chassidus. Before we even start this journey, I'd like to go through, let me just give you a hint first. We're going to learn that the first notion of machloikas, of quarrel, of difference, came on the second day of creation. On the first day the days of creation, by the way, correspond to the 7 levels of emotions, 6 days of the week and Shabbos. So the creative process starts with Chesed. Everybody knows the Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes. We won't go past Tiferes, but let's stay at Chesed. Let's stay at Chesed and Gevurah. No, we have to go to Tiferes. Chesed, Gevurah, and Tiferes. So that Chesed was Sunday, Gevurah was Monday, Tiferes was Tuesday. On Monday, there's only Chesed. That's all there is in the world. There's no other concept yet. On the second day of creation, when Gevurah comes into play, you have the first difference. This is the first difference. This is the shorish, the mocha, the source of machloikas, of quarrel. Why? Because you have one on this side and one on that side. They've got nothing in common. Chesed is one attribute, which we'll learn in a minute. Gevurah is the other opposite extreme, which we'll learn in a minute. Both are for good. Both can be for bad. But that is the concept of machloikas. So on the first day of creation, Hashem sees that it was good. On the second day of creation, there is no such bracha. Why? Because you can't have that bracha coexisting with machloikas. Comes the third day of creation, which is Tiferes, where there is a resolution between one and the other, and you have the word kitoiv twice, that it was good twice, the bracha is there twice. So let me give you this. Let's go to the end of the mimer before we even begin it, so that you know where it's going. Aaron is Chesed. Moshe Rabbeinu is the Rebbe of the generation, but Aaron is Chesed incarnate. KORACH is Gevura incarnate. When a Gevura person views something, he views it through the lens of Gevura. When a Hesed person views something, he views it through Hesed. If you try and put them together, it's not going to work. So you're going to have a difference. So you're going to have quarrel. You're going to have a situation where there is no bracha of kitoiv yet. So let's talk about Hesed and Gevura. Hesed, and there is probably no area of Torah which is so confusing to the Gentiles as, have I turned this on? Yes. As this concept of emotions. The psychiatrists are trying to catch up, and to be fair, some of them are, and we don't want to patent on this. Gesundheit, every psychiatrist should be able to help their patients by understanding this, but most people do not understand what I'm about to say to you, and we've been through this many times, so you've heard it many times. Emotion is directional. Right? Emotion has a direction. Hesed goes out. Gevura comes in. You give Hesed, you take Gevura. So let me give you the common example that is used when this is being taught of a word which adds to the confusion of what we're talking about. Ava, love. Let's use the English word love. A person says, I love XYZ. At the moment, you have no idea what that person is articulating. Why? Because the word love covers both Chesed and Gevura, and it can't. You have to understand they're opposites, so it can't. So, for example, what is the Chesed? What's Gevura in love? Gevura in love is a taking. It's a taking. It's an incoming emotion. So you say, I go to a dinner party or a Shabbos meal or whatever, and there's never any hot chips left over. Ever notice that? Never any hot chips left over on anybody's plate. Why? Because if you ask the person why, he said, because I love chips. Right? Love hot chips. Does he really love the chips? He doesn't love the chips. Does he care about the chips' welfare? He cares that in fact, he loves the chips so much he wants to destroy them. And the more he loves them, the more quickly he wants to destroy them. He wants to eat them and consume them and chew them up and make them part of him as fast as he possibly can. Right? That's how much he loves the chips. Yep. On the other hand, if you say, what about your daughter or your granddaughter or your grandson or your son? I love my son. When you love your son, you don't want to destroy your son, God forbid. What's your biggest nachas with your son? That he leaves you and makes his own life. Not only don't you want to consume him, your biggest nachas in your love for your son is that your son can do best without you. That's what you want. There has to come a time in a healthy relationship between a father and son when the biggest thing that can please him is that he knows that he can manage without him. And yet they're totally different emotions covered by the same word love. Now, just as that is so, we operate in those two modes. So when we love, we can love with Hesed, or we can love with Gevurah. It's very rare that a person can combine both in a healthy, normal manner. So I'll give you an example that I always use because I love it, because it's just such a lie. Everybody, I'm sure, has seen the movie Casablanca, right? Everybody's seen that. Everybody knows the last scene in Casablanca where he loves this woman who loves him. We're using the word love at the moment, and he puts her on the plane with the husband and doesn't keep her for himself. Now, let's go through this. When he loves that woman, we're not talking about Hesed, we're talking about Gevurah. He wants her for himself, he wants to sleep with her, he wants to live with her, he wants her. When she loves him, that's what she wants. Same thing. To put her on the plane with another man is not that love. It's the love of Chesed. It's the love that you have for a child. It's not a love you have for a sexual object. So it's a lie. The ending of that movie is a lie. And you know what? There are thousands, hundreds of thousands, probably millions of psychiatrist couches that have been filled with people struggling to try and make sense of the fact that they feel guilty, that they don't feel like that. And why do they feel guilty? Because they don't understand that one direction is a giving direction, one direction is a taking direction, and that movie puts them together as a cholent and says you're expected to live with that. And it's rubbish. It's a lie. So we're going to learn that KORACH's approach was an approach of Gevurah, and Aaron's approach is an approach of Chesed. And why there's a machloikas, and the machloikas is caused by KORACH, it's not caused by Aaron, because don't forget, if they are so opposing, and we're going to be talking about this as the way Am Yisrael should serve their God, then if there is a difference, you would be excused for thinking that Aaron should make the same machloikas that KORACH did. In other words, if you're saying that you've got Hesed on the one hand and Gevurah on the other hand, and Aaron is Chesed and KORACH is Gevurah, just as KORACH can mind that Aaron is trying to serve God through Chesed, Aaron should mind that KORACH is trying to serve God through Gevurah. Why is this machlokas caused by KORACH? And the answer to that is why KORACH was wrong, which we'll come to. But first of all, we need to understand the issue. L'chaim. Okay, I want to reserve a little bit of time for Gimel Tammuz, so I'm not going to do this Maimah justice, but we'll try. In the Maimah, I said to you we're going to learn, it starts off with the words that KORACH took, and the Rebbe explains that what does this word took mean? The Rebbe explains that he took himself out of the joint communal equation. He took himself out of the level of cooperation that we need to have, Am Yisrael needs to have, in order that we have Shalom. And Torah ultimately is the blueprint and the requirement of Shalom. There is no greater bracha for Yidden than Shalom. There's no greater bracha for Yidden than Achdus, unity. There is a book which I think I lent you once. I think it was called Portrait of a People. It's a history book. It's probably out of print now, where this genius, who's been dead now for probably a generation, traces through the whole of history and quantifies the level of peace and prosperity contrasted with how Jews are behaving. And when Jews are behaving and being good to each other and being supportive of one another, the world flourishes. And when Jews bicker and argue and are selfish and are excluding each other's welfare, the world suffers. It's a fascinating proposition. Again, it's not something that you can measure scientifically, but Blind Freddy, if you read this book, Blind Freddy sees the correlation. So when it says that KORACH took, the first point that the Rebbe makes is that he took himself out of a peaceful coexistence with his neighbors, even though he's motivated by good, as we'll see. So then the Rebbe explains the first division. And when you'll all remember from Bereshit that this division happened on the second day, where Hashem took the waters and separated the waters into the upper waters and the lower waters. Now that's big code. That's big code. Libraries have been written about this separation, but it is fundamentally the first separation being between Chesed and Gevurah, because the first day and the second day. And then the third day cures that machloikas. The third day makes it possible to combine Chesed and Gevurah, and when that combination takes place in Sholem, then the bracha of Kitov is made twice. Okay, then the Maimon goes on. I'm just going to try and summarize this to you before we get to the... So, Hashem divides the waters into the upper waters and the lower waters. Now, Blind Freddy can see that the upper waters is Ruchnius and the lower waters is Gashmius. So you get the first question. Which is more important? Hashem is making the world, makes the upper waters and the lower waters, Ruchnius and Gashmius. Which is more important? So, if you want to say Ruchnius, then you have to say, well, then what does God need to create Gashmius for? Why create Gashmius? If you want to say Gashmius, then you have to say, well, what's the whole of Ruchnius for? Why? What are you telling me? God's going to abdicate his job as in spirituality? So which is it? And so long as it remains separate, you've got to understand that we've got a sick condition, because the answer has got to end up being both. Otherwise, you don't have a resolution of day one and day two. This may be conceptually difficult, but I don't believe it's beyond anybody, certainly at this table, and from the people that I hear that listen to it on the tape, I don't believe it's beyond anybody. So the Rebbe takes much longer to explain this, and he goes through it. It's more helpful to do it in the original, but we don't have time for it, so I'm trying to do it as best as I can with little background. So, but the Chesed and the Gevurah have both got to be fundamentally rationalized. So you need to see that KORACH is traveling with a perspective of Gevurah. We're going to learn that. Aaron is traveling with the perspective of Ava, with love, because it says that Aaron loved peace and chased after peace. Oyev Shalom, Beroidev Shalom. He loved peace and ran after peace. That's Chesed. Now, KORACH wanting to insist on the Gevurah is the cause of Machlokas. In other words, insisting that one is right and the other is wrong, is contrary to a principle that we have of Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim haim, means these and these are the words of the living God. There is no such thing as a contradiction in Torah. They're just various aspects. Let me illustrate the usual example. You have a diamond, and the diamond is buried in mud. So the fact that it's buried in mud doesn't change its intrinsic properties. What it does change is its ability to sparkle. Why do people want diamonds? Because they sparkle. When the diamond's cleaned up, it sparkles, it has many facets, as everybody knows. It depends which facet is facing the light to start flashing that light. So you have many facets, but it's still one diamond. And if that diamond, let's extrapolate the diamond to the neshama of a yid, you can have a diamond in a yid that shines in many, many facets, like, for example, the Rebbe, where blind Freddie saw that he was a diamond, and everybody got what they wanted from him. Children got a flash for children, and women for women, and men for men, and people in trouble for solutions to their problems, whatever it was. Or you can have a yid who never knows nothing. It's not his fault. He hasn't been taught anything. Everything we're talking about now is a foreign language. And he's like the diamond that's buried in the dirt. Doesn't mean that if you clean the dirt off him, he won't be a diamond. He stays a diamond, whether he's in the dirt or he's not in the dirt. KORACH says, no, it's not that the diamond has 70 facets. It's got one facet, mine. And there are plenty of people like that. You and I know that and there's an aspect of all our personalities. Don't forget this, that there's a KORACH in our personality, there's an Aaron in our personality, there's a Moshe Rabbeinu in our personality, because we're Yids. And Torah is nitzchis, it's eternal, it applies to every Jew in every generation. They're not just stories, they are levels of spiritual consciousness which we all have. Some people can identify them, some people can't. People need education. It's not their fault if they can't identify them. Now, KORACH was extremely clever. This is one of the things that Gemara explains, that he was a genius. And he saw the world through his perception as a genius, and saw that for the world to run, the solar system to run, the planets to run, the stars to shine, has to be through Gevurah. It has to be an orderly process. You can't have the sun decide, today I'm not strong. Woke doesn't exist for KORACH, right? The whole woke industry, you go to work, you don't go to work, you forgive him, you don't forgive him, you take drugs, you don't take drugs, you do this, you get drunk. That KORACH says that's not a way to live. You got to have sun rising in the morning, sun setting at night. It has to be with order and discipline. And Aaron is saying, not everybody can live like that. You've got to cut some people some slack. They're not educated, they're traumatized, they are carrying scars. You've got to cut some people slack. What's the truth? The truth is that both are right. But KORACH can't see that both are right. Now, we know we have a midrash, which unbelievably deep midrash. But people sail through this, little kids sail through this, and have no idea what they're talking about. It says that when Hashem started, one of the first midrashim, when Hashem started to create the world, he did so through Shem Elohim, through Gevurah. You familiar with this? And then he saw that it wouldn't work, so he introduced to it Hesed. And if you go through the first opening psukim of Bereshis, you'll see at which point the word Yud Kei Vav Kei comes in, and when it starts with the Shem Elokim. It starts with Shem Elokim because that's Gevurah. And you have to ask yourself the question, what sort of apparent nonsense is this? Hashem decides he's going to create the world with Gevurah, and then he thinks, oh no, I must have made a mistake, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to amend my plans, and I'm going to do it with Gevurah as well, because I didn't think, wasn't clever enough to work out that I have to have Chesed with Gevurah from the beginning, right? That's not what it means at all. It means that Gevurah is the basic building block, but it needs to be tempered with Chesed. It needs to be tempered with kindness. And let's take it back to a grob set of feelings for a human being. A man is in love with a woman and wants to, but this is now a love for chips, not a love for a child. So he wants to consume the woman. Now, does that give him the right to beat her up? Like you see on television, these footballers who keep beating up their girlfriends. You should know that we have no history of this. Am Yisrael has no history of this. What do they call it now? That's
domestic violence.
Domestic violence. We have no history of domestic violence. Hitting a woman, hitting the mother of your children, unknown to us.
You know, in Amsterdam, some hundreds of years ago.
Can we do it after the shida? Yeah, because it's just that I lose track.
Yeah.
So why? Because even the consumption level of the chips has to be tempered with decency, of caring for the person. You tell me that the ending to the movie is wrong. It is wrong. It's a lie. But it's also a lie to say that it's okay to consume the chips without any welfare for the other person. That's also a lie. And these, I don't want to single out any other religions, and this is not a political forum, but we all know that there's a lot of popular press at the moment where, well, I'll say it in open language. No, I won't. They may come and bash me. But there are religions that allow rape. And you know, if a woman gets raped, it's her fault. You know why it's her fault? Because she's not properly dressed. So it's her fault. What does that mean? It's an absolute travesty of everything. So it means that unbridled Gevurah is okay. Well, we don't believe it's okay. We believe there has to be shalom between Gevurah and Chesed. And the two waters that we're talking about are the two differences where this shalom has to be made. So you tell me that, says the Rebbe, you tell me that KORACH is such a genius. He understands that as well. He understands. So what's the difference between the two waters given both their perspectives? So Aaron understands. So let's start with KORACH. KORACH says, oh, by the way, I have to explain something else. There's a code word in Torah for pleasure. Pleasure is activated or enabled by water. That's the code. Water is always a symbol of the enabling of pleasure, whether it's ruchnius pleasure or physical pleasure. So when it says it divides the water between the upper water and the lower water, this is also deep code in Kabbalah and Chassidus for spiritual pleasure and physical pleasure. Okay? Everybody understands the difference. You can have spiritual pleasure taking your daughter under the chuppah or being a sandik at your grandson's bris, and you can have physical pleasure from all the obvious places that we know, from food, from drink, from power, from money, from whatever it is. So KORACH says, well, which is the more important level, ruchnius or gashmius? says KORACH, Gashmias. Why? Because Hashem made the world for physicality. So that was, if he made the world for physicality, physicality is the main game. And if physicality is the main game, let's understand that. The Meraglim have just come back. Moshe Rabbeinu says, everybody's Kodesh. You can't sit out in the desert on your own and want to daven and pray all day. You've got to go into Eretz Canaan with everybody else. And you've got to become farmers and you've got to work the land, because the main game is physicality. So says KORACH, if the main game is physicality, which I believe it is, what do you want from us? We want to do the physicality. What's the physicality? The physicality is taking Gashmias and using it for the welfare of mankind. So what do you want from me? Aaron says, no. You're right. The main game is physicality, but it's only in order that we take the physicality and elevate it into Ruchnias, and at the same time bring Ruchnias down into Gashmias. So they are different points of view. They're different perspectives. Hesed is the concept of elevation of Gashmias, and Ruchnias is a concept of Milmala Lamata, from above to below. Okay. Ultimately, KORACH is wrong. Why? Because he is driven by another factor. He's driven by Yeshus. And Yeshus is the enemy of spiritual growth. In other words, and we haven't got time for this now, we've done it many shurim, but Yeshus, ego, and self-esteem are not contradictions. Self-esteem is where you recognize your qualities, but you understand that your qualities come from Hashem. You recognize your failings, but instead of beating yourself up about your failings, you understand that they're from Hashem and they're there for you to work with to improve. Yeshus is when a person thinks that if I'm a good tennis player, it's my doing, right? That's Yeshus. It's not your doing. The practice is your doing. The little polishing is your doing. But when you compare your capacity without any practice, without any polishing, to one of my daughters, who to this day don't see any connection between the ball and the racket. To this day, we have a tennis court up there. You know, I used to have to buy them clothes to get them up on the new tennis outfit, Daddy. So get a new tennis outfit, they'll go up there. Do they ever contact the racket with the ball with the racket? Never. And they can practice until they're blue in the face. You're a tennis teacher, you know. There's some people you can teach them all their life. They'll never be able to hit the ball. So, but KORACH is saying, I'm in charge. There's only one point of view. It's my point of view. It's Gevurah. The world's got to run with Gevurah, otherwise it can't exist. And therefore, who puts Aaron in charge? Aaron is Hesed. Hesed won't work. We need Gevurah. There's no, and I don't recognize that there can be any combination. It has to be one. And if it's one, it has to be me. Whereas, when there's a medrash that says that the moon came, because it says in Bereshis that Hashem created the two lights, the first few days of creation. And the medrash says that the two lights were the same size. So the moon came to Hashem and said, it's not right that there should be two lights the same size. What do you need two lights the same size? So Hashem said, you're right, we'll shrink you, and you're the moon. So the sun and the moon, how the moon became smaller than the sun was because of that dialogue. That dialogue is a children's language for a very deep concept, that when the moment you transfer your understanding of this to your own importance, that you believe you deserve something, then you're in very dangerous waters. So at the bottom line, because I want to just talk to you about Gimel Tammuz for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. The bottom line is that KORACH was a holy Jew, meaning well, but he was wrong, and he was wrong for the reasons that we've learned. And the reasons that we've learned should be a set of searchlights for each of us for our own avoider. Because our own avoider has to be an understanding that Hesed has to be tempered with Gevurah, and Gevurah has to be tempered with Hesed. And it always needs to be in order to serve our God, not in order to serve ourselves. And that's at the fundamental level of his mistake and his sin, was that KORACH was interested in KORACH. And that is no good. That's our prohibition. We have to be interested in being shluchim of Hashem, to do the job that we have been born with. Some people have harder tests, some people have easier tests. We should give each other a bracha that our tests should be as easy as possible. But you have to understand that Hashem is running the world and He knows what He's doing. And if we get these tests, they're for our benefit. Okay, so l'chaim. Next week, on Tuesday, is Gimel Tammuz. So Tuesday night when we meet is already after Gimel Tammuz. It's the 4th of Tammuz. Gimel Tammuz is the day on which the Rebbe passed away. And I just want to say...
30 years.
Huh? 30 years. Unbelievable. I still remember when he had the first stroke, which was 32 years ago. Rabbi Feldman rang me in my office and he said, it appears that the Rebbe's fallen over at the oil. And Rabbi Feldman's very clever. And I said, well, what does that mean? And he said, Robert, I'm telling you now, we don't know. And that was a piece of the Vias. We just don't know. But I wanted to tell you that these perspectives of KORACH and Aaron, and we live our lives going to work, coming home, eating dinner, cleaning our teeth, putting out the garbage, living all the gashmias things that we do, unaware, blissfully unaware, that going on around us are huge spiritual forces which we don't identify in the same way as we don't identify certain sounds, because our sensory system doesn't go there. Dogs do. Birds have a method of communication which is some sort of telepathy which we don't understand. Otherwise, how can they go from New Zealand to London and not take a wrong direction in any? So there are many forces that we don't understand. So I wanted to share with you a story about the Rebbe, which is not in my book, because the stories I have in the book are stories from our family personally. I'm going to tell you a story that was told to me at our first Yake Kala, that's now about 45 years ago, by Rabbi Motel Kresiansky, who lives in Melbourne. He's a friend of mine, and he's a very great Talmud Chacham, and he told us this story at the Shabbos afternoon Farbrengen, and I think it would be a great story for everybody to carry into Gimel Tammuz, because in so many ways it shows two things. It shows who the Rebbe was, and we didn't understand that in any way and still don't, and at the same time know that unlike KORACH, the Moshe Rabbeinu of the generation isn't focused on him. He's focused on every Yid, collectively and separately. So this story went like this. Motel Kresiansky, or Rabbi Kresiansky, was a bocher on Shlichus in South America. And in the bochrim in the yeshiva were invited Friday night to a Gevir's house, a rich man's house, and the Rosh Yeshiva sent them, so they all went for dinner, and they're sitting in this massive, opulent house, marble, and the host is giving them a l'chaim and another l'chaim, and the dinner's progressing, and everyone says a Dvar Torah, and they stay and they have more l'chaim. And Mottel had a lot of chutzpah when he was 18, 19 years of age, and he turns to this guy who is wearing a yarmulke, but he's clean shaven. There's no signs of frumkeit about this guy at all, and he's got this opulent house, and Mottel was from in Brazil, or wherever they were in South America. I think it was Brazil. So, but there was no direct flight then from Brazil to Tokyo, so he went through New York, and when he was in New York in his hotel room, they used to have a cable show thing where the Rebbe would be showing on a Farbrengen on cable television. He saw that on the thing, and he remembered the promise that he made to his father. So he rang 770, because there's an advertisement at the bottom, if you ring 770, he rang 770, made an appointment with one of the Maskirim to see the Rebbe at some ridiculous hour in the night that he couldn't understand, 3 in the morning. But he promised his father, what could he do? And he promised he'd ask him anything important. What's more important than money? Nothing's more important. So if he's going to try and get the television, at least he should follow his father. So he goes 3:30 in the morning or whatever it was, and he goes into the Rebbe, and there's an exchange with the Rebbe. And when he comes out, Rabbi Hardikoff, who was then the main secretary, comes over to him and says, excuse me, the Rebbe has asked you to do him a favor. Would you take a small parcel with you to Tokyo? Now this was before drugs, and you'd have to check the parcel, and he wasn't worried about what was in the parcel. He said, sure. If the Rebbe gave me the time, he gave me brachas for the money and the televisions, and Rebbe Hardikoff said, he gave you brachas for the television, you'll get the televisions. He thinks to himself, alavai, so he takes the parcel, and he goes to Japan, and he's in Tokyo, and in one day, he stitches up the agency. He gets the agency, but his flight's not due back for another 4 days. There wasn't a flight every day, once every 4 days back to New York. So, because this was early 60s, right? So he goes for a walk. Now, for anyone who knows anything about Japan, especially then, there's no English. There's no English in Japan. So he's walking the streets, doesn't understand a word on the signs, doesn't know where he is, doesn't know where he's going, and he sees a Magen David on a building, and he sees a Magen David, he thinks maybe it's a shul. He goes in, and it's a shul. There's no one in it except for one guy who's sitting in the front row, well dressed in a nice suit, and he walks in, and the guy's crying, sitting in his seat, crying. So he walks down to the guy and says, Shalom Aleichem, and the guy says, Aleichem Shalom, and where are you from? From France, from Paris. Where are you from? From Brazil. Do you mind me asking why you're crying? So he gives a big fetch, and he says, I'll tell you the truth. He said, I am a representative for Citroën cars. He was the general sales manager for Citroën cars, and so his job was to fly all over the world to sell Citroën cars. And once they were taking off from Paris, this is a second story within the story. Once they were taking off from Paris airport, the plane got into trouble, burst into flames at one of the engines, crash landed back down on the ground. Nobody was seriously hurt, but he was totally traumatized. The next time he tried to get on a plane, he became a quivering wreck. He couldn't possibly do it. He couldn't manage on the plane, and and suddenly he had no livelihood because his livelihood was to go and sell cars internationally by plane. So he goes to doctors and he goes to a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrists tell him that what do you want? That they treat sickness. This isn't a sickness. This is a normal thing. You're in a flaming plane crash. You're scared. Come on, that's normal. I can't cure that. So then, finally he ends up with. He's at a party of some kind, or a sales meeting of some kind, and he meets the shliach, actually my next door neighbor's relative, in Paris, and this shliach says, you know what, you should write to the Rebbe. Who's the Rebbe? He says, you should write to the Rebbe because the Rebbe will fix you. And he doesn't believe, but he's desperate. He's got no parnassus by now, right? So he writes to the Rebbe and gets an immediate reply that he should learn a certain perik of Tanya, a certain chapter of Tanya, and learn it with this shliach in French, the French translation, and every time he gets on a plane, he should read in French this perik of Tanya over and over and over again, and so long as he's reading it, he will not be frightened. So the guy can't believe this, but he's ready to try anything. So he gets on the plane, the engine starts, he starts shaking like a leaf. Remember, takes out the Tanya, opens it to the page and starts to read, right? And he feels better. He doesn't feel like running in the Olympic Games, but he can tolerate the plane, and he manages to go and come back. And whenever he puts it down, he gets terrified again. He gets some panic attacks, and the moment he starts reading, he's all right. So the guy says, "That's amazing." He says, "I've just come from New York, and I've just come from the Rebbe." So the guy says to him, so he says, "But why are you crying?" The guy says, "You don't understand. I've lost the Tanya. Lost the Tanya. I can't move. Nobody speaks English. I can't get out of here." So the guy says, "You know what? Stay here. I have a package in my room." He runs back to his room, to the hotel, opens the package, and what's in it? 2 Tanyas. So he brings him the Tanya. The guy is Basimcha Rabbah, as you can imagine. And then he turns to Motel at the table, and he said, "Even I'm not so stupid as to not to know who the other Tanya was for." That's who our Rebbe is. There are some questions that you can't live without asking, right? The Rebbe is sitting in New York. He's never met the guy from Brazil. He's written to the guy in Paris, but he's never met him. He doesn't know that the guy in Paris is stuck in Japan. He doesn't know any of those things, B'derech HaTeva. And yet he asks him to take it. So when he took the parcel, he said to Rabbi Hadakov, "But what am I supposed to do with it?" Rabbi Hadakov says, I didn't ask you to take it. How do I know? He says, "Well, would you mind asking the Rebbe?" He said, "We can't ask the Rebbe. The Rebbe says to do it, you do it." So he takes it. Kol hakavod that he had the decency to do it. But so you have to ask yourself, what are the forces that the Rebbe reads that we don't even imagine? So then you have to take that to the next step of Gimel Tammuz Farbrengens, and I've been to many of them, 30 of them at least, and some of them are very poor, and some of them, I went to one, I have to tell you, in Melbourne, where somebody I admire very much, but I won't say the name because it's a political issue with him, but he said a fascinating thing. He said, because there's a problem with our relationship with the Rebbe. The Rebbe said that we are Dor Shvi, which means the seventh generation, right? And there was a big question: what does that mean? When when Gimel Tammuz happened, the Rebbe was the seventh Rebbe of Chabad, but when he died, what does Dor Shvi mean? So everybody struggles with that. This guy, and the common position today, there are two common positions. One is Meshuggah. That's the guys who say, well, the Rebbe's not dead. This is not dead. And if you go to 770, there's a group of people who stand up at the time of the minyan, make a pathway, pull the chair back, and then push the chair back, and there's no one there, right? I mean, and these Mashiachists are very big. And they say the Rebbe's Mashiach, and therefore he's still alive. And there's a lot of Mashiachists in. This is political. I shouldn't be saying this with the tape on, but and they believe that. Well, this guy explained Dor Shvi like this. He said that so long as there is no further Rebbe, this is Dor Shvi. And why is there no further Rebbe? Because it's not necessary. Otherwise, Hashem would have, by now, by Ashkoka Brothers, organized another Rebbe. So, but the question is, do you and I need an alive Rebbe? And the answer must be no. Must be no. Otherwise, we would have it. So, is our level of communication to the Rebbe as strong as if he was alive? The answer is yes. We have a Hayoim Yom from 2 days ago, which says, you asked me what the Frierdiker Rebbe says to somebody. You asked me how you can be connected to me even though we've never met. And he answers, you can be connected to me by learning my Torah, by mixing with my Hasidim, and going to Fabringens and learning my ways. So I just added that story so that we have something together for Gimel Tammuz. That was all. So l'chaim.
So I think the number 7 is actually Dor Shvi'i Shel Hasidim also.